Hello fellow cyborgs, and welcome to another mini wrap-up where I tell you about the books that I have currently read, the books that I have currently hauled, but actually I'm not going to do that this time because I just recently did a haul video, check it out, and the books that I am currently reading. So let's get started with the books that I read. I finished How to Speak Dragonese, the third book in the How to Train Your Dragon series by Cressida Cowell. I read the audiobook narrated by the marvelous David Tennant and gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed Kamikaze and learning more about the Roman culture and the bog burglars, and especially enjoyed the nano dragons and Zagorastica, their king. So this was another really fun ride, and hope to continue with my reread of this series through audiobooks after I get a few of my TBR books off of my shelf through my ears with their audiobooks first. I then finished a recent haul. It came from the deep. This is a YA mermaid book, even though the back doesn't specifically say mermaid, and the correct acumen and nomenclature would actually be aquatic humanoid, as the book says. So It Came from the Deep was interesting. I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars because it was just not for me, but this was a fast-paced, fairly short, positive relationship, for the most part modeling YA thriller / mermaid book set in Australia from an independent writer. So it's got a lot of good things going for it. We follow Kaya, who is a recent high school graduate and a really awesome surfer, but who is haunted by the events that turned bad at a recent surfing competition, and she holds a lot of guilt from that. From the consequences of this surfing competition and the bad thing that happened, she is attacked but then saved by some mysterious thing that is trapped in this lake. We're just going full vague here. Minor spoilers, the thing in the lake ends up being a sentient merman named Amos. I liked how there wasn't insta-love. I liked how the romance, at least from one perspective, was kind of explainable. I enjoyed Kaya's relationships with her brother and father and how they weren't perfect. I enjoyed that there was Kaya's newly best friend is a woman of color and also gay. That was good. Overall, I liked the length. I felt like most of it was, well paced, though it was kind of slow toward the beginning. We don't get to the merman for quite a while, and so you kind of have no idea where this book is going for a good 50, I think, pages, and this was only a 250 page book or something like that. But I did find that the climax and the ending was really kind of crazy. The bad guys in this story were completely unexplained, and it's like the book had zero interest in giving us those background details because they weren't characters we were supposed to care about, so why should we understand how they function in the world and why they're doing what they're doing? And I also found that, slight spoilers, but Amos ends up killing some people to protect Kaya, and this is never addressed as a problematic thing. So as much as otherwise Amos is a pretty well-rounded supernatural love interest in a YA novel, there's this aspect to him that, like I said, never addressed or questioned or tempered or anything. So that was a little bit, I think for the most part, the reason why this is a 2 out of 5 stars because it's YA, and that's just not my jam. Romance as a plot line is just not my thing right now, for the most part. I don't think that this is actually 2 out of 5 star quality, but I only thought it was okay, and that's how I rate my books on the Goodreads. So if this sounds intriguing to you, then you should read it because it was definitely not bad, but it just wasn't my thing. Then I finished my third reading experience of Villette, and this I buddy read with M.A. Anders, and it was such a delightful buddy reading experience. I'm so glad that I buddy read it with her. It really enriched this reading experience a lot. I will talk about this more in my Villette review, but to sum up, this was probably the reading experience of Villette I enjoyed the most, and yet this is the time where I have rated it the lowest. And I will explain why that's a legitimate thing in my review, but I gave this 3 out of 5 stars upon this reading experience, though I did get quite a bit out of it. And refer to that video if you want to hear more. And today I finally got to Measure for Measure, which I hauled at the beginning of this year because Libby made me. This is her favorite Shakespeare play, and this is also the Bard Book Club pick for July and now August, and it's easy to read Shakespeare and all in one go, so I did. So I quite enjoyed this Shakespeare play. I think this is one of my favorite Shakespeare plays that I have like read in recent times, because most of my Shakespeare reading was in high school and college, and then I had like a huge lull and now I'm reading him again. Measure for Measure, just for you that have like no idea what this is about, this takes place in Vienna. There's a duke who is a pretty good ruler, but he isn't really strict on his peoples, and he recognizes that they're kind of like skirting the law a lot of the time, and he decides to go on vacation and to put Angelo, who's this very strict and structured and very moral man, in charge, knowing that Angelo will enforce the law and his subjects will now be law-abiding citizens but not hate him for it. But then Angelo kind of goes overboard and decides that he's going to execute this guy named Claudio because he had sex with his fiancée before marriage, and you're not allowed to do that. And so Claudio has to die now. And then Claudio's sister Isabella goes to Angelo to plead for mercy, and Angelo suddenly is like, oh my gosh, I want to bang this lady. And I've never want to banged anybody in my life. So he's like, okay, Isabella, ultimatum. You sleep with me, I will give mercy to Claudio and he won't die. And then the play unfolds from there. It's a play about like morality and ethics and power corrupting and the like law and mortality as well as morality. There were a couple good lines, but the prose that like wasn't super like exciting poetry wise was still interesting plot wise, and none of the characters like super annoyed me like Falstaff did. I definitely think I enjoyed this more than Richard II, even though Richard II is probably the better play, just because this one's like really ridiculous and it tiptoes the line between Shakespeare just being kind of insane in like the comedic like drama of his stuff, but then also touching on some actually like really intense like philosophical topics. Angelo and Isabella's scenes were really interesting because they have very different thought processes, but they both like have reason on their sides, and it was really interesting to hear their arguments to one another. The Duke was kind of an idiot. He's a bit of a butthead. I think he was probably my least favorite in this play. But overall, I was like having emotional reactions to this play and to like the actual plot. I'm really eager to hear Libby talk about it a little bit more because, you know, I can listen to her talk about whatever and then I immediately want to read it. So anywho, that was Measure for Measure. I definitely enjoyed it. It has lots of sex in it. Like, not that people are doing it, but they're talking about it a lot and making jokes about it a lot. So I think it's really weird that this was part of Ms. Lama's classroom library, because I don't think professors loan out books like this, and why would you give this book to a minor? So that's that. That's what I've read recently. I'm working on some audiobooks, okay? Don't judge me. My physical TBR is currently at 40, because I hauled some stuff. See the haul video for details on that. But I'm slowly working my way through some of those and have plans for some of them as well. I have recently started reading Ray Bradbury's One More for the Road. I hauled this a couple months ago, and this is a short story collection by Ray Bradbury, and I'm reading one story an evening, and that's been working pretty well, and I'm like halfway through. I'm not like loving a lot of these, but there's something still really cozy and familiar about Ray Bradbury's writing style. There were a couple that I've really liked in here. There's also been like 3 stories with like sex in it, not like sex scenes, but like talking about sex, and it's just like, Ray Bradbury, what are you doing? You're a wholesome 1950s Martians on the Red Planet guy. Why are you talking about sex? But hey, you know, he was a human, so he's allowed to do that. I am also in the middle of my 5th reading of Jane Eyre, and I'm reading this with a friend. I was supposed to read Agnes Grey before reading Jane Eyre, but it just didn't work out that way, so I'm rereading Jane Eyre, and I still have Agnes Grey to read as the final Bronte book of the Bronte binge, at least of the 7 novels. I am enjoying this, but this is like, I'm reading it pretty quickly, and it's a really fast-paced read, and I'm not reading it as analytically quickly as I have in the past, because it's just like so much fun, and there's so much dialogue in there that you just like speed through like you don't even know. So yeah, enjoying this and having good conversations. So I will report back once I finished. I'm also still slowly picking my way through Waterfalls of Stars, My 10 Years on the Island of Skomer by Roseanne Alexander. I have like 125 pages left or something like that. I'm really enjoying this still. The writing style is still superb, and I really enjoy the nature writing, but this book is not as structured as I prefer. I think it works really well. The style works really well with the content of this, because it's kind of like Roseanne Alexander telling you about the 10 years she lived on Skomer with her husband and how they passed really quickly, and so everything kind of just is like a blur, but there's a dream-like quality to the narrative where suddenly something will be happening for 5 pages, and then we're suddenly talking about some birds, and then something will happen, and then we're talking about these animals, and then something. And so it's just, there's no like clear like plot line for each chapter. So I'm getting kind of lost a little bit. But like I said, I think that matches well with what this book is about. I think it's just my personal preference not aligning with what this is and how it probably should have truly been displayed and organized. So anyway, those were the books that I have recently read and I'm currently reading. Please let me know in the comments down below, what book have you reread the most? I would love to know if you reread, and what's the one that you've reread the most. I think it is Jane Eyre now for me, though I'm pretty sure it was Twilight for a fair number of years. I mean, I was a goth, so anywho, thank you for watching, and until next time, continue to be lovely.